The stars above Earth seemed endless as a massive ship broke through the vast expanse of space. It was a vessel unlike any the people of Earth had ever seen, its sleek, metallic surface shimmering like a living thing. It was the flagship of the Sinax, a galactic race known for their advanced technology and wisdom. This was the first time humans were to make official contact with an alien species, and the world held its breath. In the brightly lit control room of the ship, Cyril stood before a giant viewport, gazing down at the blue planet below. She was the leader of the Sinax delegation, a woman of sharp intelligence and calculated grace. Cyril had seen many planets in her time, and she had studied Earth from afar. It wasn't much to look at in her eyes. Primitive, weak, and undeveloped. The human race had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere, and their technology was laughable compared to the Sinax's. They still use fossil fuels to power their machines, don't they? Cyril's voice was calm, almost dismissive. Her second-in-command, Rylath, nodded. Yes, Commander. They're still using engines that run on combustion. It's hard to believe they've made it this far. Cyril nodded slowly, her mind already moving on to the next steps. The Sinax didn't expect much from this meeting. The humans, they thought, would be curious, perhaps a little scared, but ultimately, they would fall into line. It was a simple mission, to observe and assess. After all, the Sinax had been through this process hundreds of times before. Cyril believed it would be no different with Earth. As their ship descended toward the planet, a series of signals blinked on the control panel. The humans were ready to receive them. The stars above Earth twinkled in the distance, and the alien vessel touched down on the designated landing zone, a vast, open field in a remote area. The humans had chosen the location deliberately, perhaps to give a sense of peace and neutrality to the proceedings. The ramp of the Sinax ship slowly lowered, and the first humans came into view. Their leaders, all dressed in formal attire, looked nervous, but the woman in charge stood confidently. Captain Sarah Holt was tall, with short black hair and a steady, commanding presence. She was a military officer, the one chosen to lead this first encounter. Beside her stood a small group of diplomats and technicians, all eager but clearly unsure of what to expect. Cyril studied the humans as they approached, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. She noticed their uniforms, their expressions, and the way they carried themselves. The humans seemed fragile, almost delicate, in comparison to the tall, powerful form of a Sinax. Cyril couldn't help but smile to herself. They were eager to make a good impression, but she was certain they didn't stand a chance against the might of the Sinax. "Welcome to Earth, Commander Cyril," Captain Holt said, her voice firm but friendly. "We are honored by your visit." Cyril extended a hand in greeting, but her gesture was more about observing than it was about warmth. "Thank you, Captain Holt. Your planet has intrigued us, though I must admit, we did not expect much." The captain's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "We're a bit more than you might expect. If you'll follow me, we'll begin with a demonstration of our technological advancements." Cyril raised an eyebrow. She had heard rumors about humans' technological progress, but she was skeptical. She had no doubt that the humans had learned a few tricks along the way. But surely their technology couldn't match the Sinax. The idea seemed laughable. "Lead the way, Captain," Cyril said coolly. The humans ushered the Sinax delegation to a large outdoor area where several displays were set up. One of the first demonstrations was a display of human drones. The machines hovered above the ground, performing complex maneuvers with precision. But Cyril wasn't impressed. The Sinax had drones far more advanced, capable of faster speeds, and far more impressive feats. She glanced at Rylath, who seemed equally unimpressed. "These are your cutting-edge machines?" Cyril asked, her tone dripping with curiosity, though not entirely kind. "We believe they are the best of our current abilities," Captain Holt answered with a smile. "But we have other technologies to show you." Next, the humans showed off self-driving vehicles, which were surprisingly efficient. The cars glided across the ground without a driver, steering themselves with a perfect sense of direction. To the Synax, it was a simple feat, nothing that required any real intelligence or innovation. But the humans seemed proud of it. XRL couldn't help but wonder, were these their toys? Was this all they had? Then the humans introduced their nuclear fusion reactors, a technology that they claimed could provide limitless clean energy. It was a more impressive demonstration, though XRL couldn't help but notice how crude it looked compared to Synax technology. Still, she didn't dismiss it entirely. There might be some potential there, but she kept her thoughts to herself. And then came something unexpected. The humans didn't just show off their machines and technology. They also showed how they used them, how humans had adapted and used their limited resources to overcome challenges that would have destroyed other civilizations. "This is what we're most proud of," Captain Holt said, looking directly at XRL. "Our ability to innovate, to adapt. We are a young species, but we have learned to fight, to survive, and to work together." XRL felt a momentary flicker of doubt. Perhaps humans were more than just their primitive tech after all. But she quickly dismissed the thought. The Synax were far superior in every way. They had strength, wisdom, and experience. Nothing the humans had seen so far would be enough to change that. Little did she know, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The sun was setting on Earth's landscape, casting a soft, golden light over the area where the first contact between humans and the Synax delegation was taking place. Captain Sarah Holt stood beside XRL, the leader of the Synax, watching the last of the demonstrations. The human technology, though impressive in some ways, seemed so much simpler compared to the advanced tools the Synax used on their home planet. Yet there was something about the humans that fascinated XRL. She had come to Earth expecting to find little more than a primitive race, clumsy and disorganized. But now, standing before her, was a species with a strange, relentless energy, a drive to adapt and survive no matter what. It wasn't the technology that intrigued her, it was the humans themselves. "So, what do you think of our tech so far?" Captain Holt asked, trying to gauge the Synax leader's thoughts. She couldn't help but notice that Cyril hadn't seemed particularly impressed, but there was a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. Cyril studied the humans for a moment before speaking, her voice soft but sharp. "Your machines are efficient, but far behind what we have in the Synax. However, it is clear that your species is persistent. You make the most out of what you have." Sarah smiled slightly, sensing the compliment buried beneath the alien's words. "That's exactly what we do. We don't have the luxury of relying on sheer power, so we have to think creatively." The captain then looked at her watch and turned to XRL. "We've got something a little different for you, a surprise, if you will." Cyril raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "A surprise? What do you mean?" Without answering, Sarah led Cyril and the rest of the Synax delegation to a large, flat area near the center of the compound. There, in the middle of the open space, was a set of large metal structures. They looked like ordinary shipping containers at first glance, but something about them was different. The Synax officers, though trained to read subtle signs of danger, couldn't quite put their fingers on what was odd about them. "Take a look at this," Sarah said, gesturing toward the containers. XRL stepped forward, her curiosity piqued. She had already seen the drones and fusion reactors, but this was something new. Sarah gave a subtle signal, and one of the human technicians began activating the containers. Slowly, the containers unfolded, revealing a massive, complex machine inside each one. The machines were unlike anything XRL had ever seen. They were not sleek or polished like Synax technology. Instead, they looked clunky, rough around the edges, almost like something a child might build. But as the machines powered up, they emitted a soft hum that resonated with a strange energy. "What is this?" Cyril asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and confusion. "This," Sarah said proudly, "is our prototype exosuit. Our version of a battle suit. Zirel's eyes narrowed. You're telling me these toys are supposed to compete with Synac's combat technology? Sarah's smile didn't waver. I thought you might say that. But wait, let me show you how it works. The human technician, now in position, climbed into one of the exosuits. The suit's metal parts snapped into place, and the figure inside moved with incredible agility, as if the suit had become an extension of the person wearing it. It leaped into the air, performing flips and somersaults, and then landed perfectly on the ground. The crowd of Synac's officers took a step back in surprise. This was no ordinary machine. It moved as if it were alive. Zirel could feel her heart rate increase, despite herself. This was something different. The exosuit wasn't just fast, it was strong. The technician lifted a large metal beam with ease, something that would have taken 10 men to lift by hand. The suit's armor seemed almost indestructible, yet it was lightweight and responsive. It was nothing like the advanced, sleek weapons of the Synax, but there was power in this human design, a raw potential that was impossible to ignore. Impressive, Zirel admitted, her voice betraying a slight tone of respect. But surely you don't think these suits will be enough to stand against the might of the Synax military? Captain Holt's expression shifted slightly. Let's put it to the test, then. Zirel's eyes widened. What do you mean? With a simple command, Sarah instructed the technician to move toward a large target in the distance. The technician activated the exosuit's weapons, and a series of energy blasts fired at the target, hitting it with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion shook the ground, but the exosuit remained perfectly balanced, unharmed by the powerful recoil. We may not have your advanced weaponry, Zirel, Sarah said, her voice firm now, but we make up for it with our ability to adapt. And that's something you can't measure with just technology. Zirel stood frozen, her mind racing. The humans were showing her something entirely new, something she hadn't expected. Creativity, ingenuity. These weren't traits the Synax valued or even understood in the same way humans did. They thought of strength in terms of sheer power and advanced technology, but humans had something else, an ability to use what they had in ways that no one could predict. For the first time, Zirel felt a wave of uncertainty. She had thought Earth was nothing but a toy, a planet with no real place in the galaxy. But now, she wasn't so sure. Perhaps humanity had more to offer than anyone could have imagined. This is unexpected, Zirel said slowly, her voice softening. Perhaps we've misjudged you. Captain Holt smiled again. It's not just about what we have. It's about how we use it. And we've learned that we can do a lot with very little. The Synax delegation was silent, processing what they had seen. The human exosuits were not just weapons. They were a symbol of humanity's endless drive to improve, to create, and to never stop moving forward. Zirel had underestimated them, and now she was beginning to see the truth. The sun had now dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. The evening air was cooler, but the excitement from the demonstration of the human exosuits still hung in the atmosphere. Zirel stood with her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the machines that had just amazed her. The Synax delegation had seen many advanced technologies across the galaxy, but this was different. These humans, with all their limitations, had managed to create something that could hold its own. The idea of a simple suit enhancing human strength and agility was revolutionary in its own right, but it still didn't compare to the full might of Synax weapons. Impressive, Captain Holt, Zirel said, her voice still carrying that calm, cool tone. But surely you know that this device cannot match the firepower of the Synax fleet. Captain Holt stood beside her, the pride in her eyes still visible. We don't need to match you in power, Zirel. We just need to survive, and we've learned how to do that with our own kind of strength. Zirel was about to respond, but before she could speak, an unexpected sound filled the air. It was low at first, a hum that seemed to come from the ground beneath their feet. The noise grew louder, and soon the earth itself seemed to tremble slightly. Everyone in the area turned to face the source of the disturbance. Several human soldiers were approaching, carrying a new type of weapon, one that none of the Synax had seen before. It wasn't a drone or a mech suit. This was different. As the soldiers approached, Cyril's sharp eyes scanned the new weapon, taking in its design. It looked like a large, heavy cannon, but it had an unusual, almost crude appearance. The weapon wasn't sleek or refined. It had edges that seemed rough, as if it had been built in a hurry, and the materials didn't appear to be of the highest quality. But the hum of energy around it suggested something much more powerful than its outward appearance. "Is this another one of your toys, Captain?" Exer asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and doubt. Sarah smiled, sensing that the alien was still skeptical. "What you're looking at is called the Project Aegis Cannon. It's a defensive weapon designed to protect our cities and people in case of an attack." Exer raised an eyebrow. "A cannon for protection. What makes this any different from the weapons we've already seen?" "I'm glad you asked," Sarah replied. She gave a quick nod to the soldiers, who set the cannon down on the ground. The machine hummed louder now, as if preparing for something. Sarah turned to Exer. "This cannon isn't about force. It's about protection. Watch closely." Without warning, a sharp sound rang out, and the cannon fired a single beam of light into the sky. The beam cut through the air with incredible speed and precision. It collided with a target in the distance, creating a blinding flash of light. When the flash faded, the target, an old rusted metal structure, had been completely disabled. There were no explosions, no shockwaves. The cannon simply neutralized the target in a way that seemed almost effortless. Cyril stepped forward, her eyes wide in disbelief. What did you just do?" Sarah's expression remained calm. "That was a neutralizing beam. The energy in the cannon can disable any incoming projectile or hostile technology. We don't destroy. We simply disable." Cyril's mind raced. She had witnessed this kind of technology before, but never in such a compact form. The Synax had their own defensive shields, of course, but they required massive energy sources and were often slow to respond. This was something completely different, a technology that could stop an attack before it even reached the target. But there was something even more surprising: the simplicity of it. The cannon was built from basic materials, and yet its effectiveness was undeniable. Humans had found a way to outthink the enemy, rather than overpower them. This is impossible," Tyrell muttered under her breath, more to herself than to anyone else. Sarah took a step toward her, sensing that Exer was beginning to understand. "I told you, it's not about matching you in strength. It's about using our minds. This cannon can protect cities, fleets, and people with minimal risk. We don't have to destroy everything to win." Tyrell stood in stunned silence, watching as the cannon powered down. The simplicity of the technology was mind-boggling. How could a species that appeared so primitive create something so effective? The Synax had relied on power for so long, and here were the humans, using their intelligence to outsmart and neutralize threats with an efficiency she hadn't thought possible. "Tell me more about this neutralizing beam," Exer said, her voice quieter now. "How does it work?" Sarah explained the science behind it, how the cannon used a combination of electromagnetic pulses and quantum energy fields to destabilize the incoming projectiles. The technology wasn't just advanced, it was innovative. Humans had taken the very nature of their environment and turned it into something they could control, something that could protect them from forces far more powerful than themselves. Cyril's respect for the human species began to grow, though she was still reluctant to admit it. She had come here expecting to find an easy victory, but now she was questioning everything she knew about the humans. "Do you think the Synax would have ever thought of such a thing?" Sarah asked, her tone a bit teasing now. We didn't need weapons of mass destruction to protect ourselves. We just needed to think. Zirel's eyes narrowed, her mind still working through what she had just witnessed. Think. That was it, wasn't it? The humans had adapted. They didn't have the massive resources or powerful technologies the Synax had, but they had something more important. A will to survive, a determination to never back down. And in the end, that might be their greatest strength. For the first time since her arrival, Zirel wasn't sure if the Synax were the most powerful species in the galaxy. Humans had shown her something she hadn't expected, and it made her wonder if they might be stronger than she had ever believed. The evening air had grown cooler as the stars twinkled brightly above, but Zirel still stood near the Project Aegis cannon, her mind racing. She had seen many impressive things in her life, but nothing had quite shaken her like what the humans had shown her today. The neutralizing beam was unlike anything the Synax had ever developed. It wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a tool for survival. As the human soldiers packed up the cannon and moved it back toward the storage area, Sarah Holt stood beside Zirel, her expression calm but proud. The alien leader hadn't said much since the demonstration, but Sarah could sense the question swirling in her mind. "I can see that you're surprised," Sarah said, her tone light. "We didn't want to show you everything all at once, but we thought this might change how you see us." Zirel's eyes shifted from the cannon to the captain. "You've done more than that," she said, her voice quieter than before. "You've shown me something I didn't expect. Creativity. Ingenuity. I didn't think these things were important to your species, but now I see that they are your greatest strength." Sarah smiled, sensing the shift in Zirel's attitude. The alien had been dismissive at first, but now there was respect in her voice, and maybe even a bit of awe. "Is it really that surprising?" Sarah asked. "We don't have the same resources as the Synax or other advanced races, but we've learned to make the most of what we have. We've always had to think differently. That's what makes us strong." Zirel stood in silence, her mind processing the new information. She had always believed the Synax were the dominant force in the galaxy. They had the technology, the power, and the experience. She had come to Earth expecting to find a weak species to conquer, but now she wasn't so sure. "This weapon, this cannon," Zirel began, her voice still filled with disbelief. "It can disable an entire fleet with a single shot." "Not an entire fleet," Sarah replied, "but it can disable a ship before it even reaches our planet. It doesn't destroy, it neutralizes. And it works on all kinds of technology, alien or human." Zirel's eyes narrowed. She had seen what the cannon could do to a simple target, but the idea that it could disrupt an entire fleet of advanced ships was something she hadn't expected. And yet, she had to admit, the humans had proved that it was possible. "Then how do you explain your people?" Zirel asked, her voice suddenly intense. "If you're so resourceful, why haven't you overcome your limitations? Why aren't you a major power in the galaxy?" Sarah's smile faded a little, but she didn't seem offended. "We're not there yet," she said, "but we're trying. We're learning. And we're not afraid to keep pushing forward, no matter what stands in our way." Zirel tilted her head, studying the human woman before her. There was a fire in her eyes, a determination that Zirel hadn't expected. It was a strength that wasn't based on technology or might, but on something deeper, something invisible. "Tell me, Captain Holt," Zirel said slowly, "do you truly believe your species can stand against us?" For the first time, Sarah paused before answering. She looked up at the stars for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Then she met Zirel's gaze. "We're not trying to beat you, Zirel," she said, her voice steady. "We're just trying to survive, to live, to protect what's ours." Zirel's gaze softened, though she tried not to show it. She had heard similar words from other species before, but there was something in Sarah's voice that made her believe them. Perhaps it was the truth in those words. Survival. That was what had driven humanity to innovate, to adapt, and to keep pushing forward no matter the odds. It wasn't about strength or domination. It was about endurance. XRL turned and began walking toward the ship that had brought her to Earth. The human delegation followed, and Sarah walked alongside her. The night air felt heavier now, as though a new understanding had settled between them. As they walked, Sarah spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "You know, we've been working on something else, something that we think could change the way we defend ourselves." Cyril glanced at her, intrigued. "What is it?" "It's a prototype," Sarah said. "A new kind of defense mechanism. It's still in development, but it could make our cities nearly impenetrable." Cyril stopped in her tracks. Impenetrable. The concept of an entire city being shielded from any attack was unusual. In all her years of traveling the galaxy, she had never encountered such a defense. The Synax had the technology to build nearly impenetrable fortresses, but this was a different kind of defense, a defense that wasn't built on power or sheer force. "What exactly are you working on?" Cyril asked, her tone more serious than before. "It's called the Aegis Shield," Sarah explained. "It's a defense grid that can adapt to incoming threats in real time. It's powered by a combination of quantum energy and electromagnetic fields. The idea is that the grid will sense attacks before they even happen and block them before they hit. It's not perfect yet, but we're getting close." Cyril felt a chill run down her spine. This was something new, something entirely different from anything the Synax had ever encountered. The humans weren't trying to fight with weapons. They were trying to outsmart their enemies by predicting threats and preventing them from ever reaching their targets. The implications of this technology were staggering. "You're telling me that you can predict attacks before they happen?" Cyril asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "That's the plan," Sarah replied, her expression serious. "We don't want to fight. We want to survive." Cyril was silent as she processed the information. She had come to Earth thinking the humans were nothing more than a primitive species, a small, weak race that had no place in the larger galaxy. But now she saw them in a different light. They were not weak. They were innovative, resourceful, and perhaps even stronger than she had ever imagined. And for the first time in a long while, Cyril felt a sense of uncertainty. The night was growing colder, and the stars above seemed to twinkle with a calm, distant light. But beneath the vastness of the sky, a tension lingered in the air. Cyril had heard many claims during her travels across the galaxy, but what the humans were saying now, impenetrable cities, predicting threats before they happened, was something unlike anything she had ever encountered. Captain Holt had led her and the other Synax officers to a small building near the human compound, where the final demonstration of the night was about to take place. The project that had been mentioned, the Aegis Shield, was something Cyril had been quietly thinking about for hours. It seemed impossible. No one had ever developed a defense system that could block attacks before they even happened. And yet, here were the humans, claiming they were on the brink of making it a reality. Sarah looked at Cyril as they approached the building, a knowing smile on her face. "I can see you're eager to see it in action." Cyril nodded, though she didn't voice her thoughts. It was a strange mix of curiosity and doubt. She had been trained to believe that the Synax were the superior species in the galaxy. They had technology far beyond that of most others. But here on Earth, the humans had already shown her things she hadn't thought possible. Could they really pull this off? As they entered the building, Cyril was immediately struck by the sight before her. In the center of the room stood a massive, complex array of equipment. It looked like a giant web of glowing wires and metallic arms, all interconnected in a way that was difficult to understand at first glance. "This," Sarah said, gesturing toward the array, "is the core of our Aegis Shield system. It's not just one device, but a network of systems working together. It's designed to detect any kind of threat, be it a missile, an incoming ship, or even a physical attack, and respond before it reaches the target." Cyril studied the system carefully. It wasn't as impressive in its appearance as some of the Synax weapons. It didn't have the sleek, powerful look of their ships or weapons. In fact, it almost looked home-made. But there was a power in its design, a simplicity that made it all the more impressive. Sarah continued, "Right now, we're going to run a simulation. We'll simulate an incoming missile attack, and you'll see how the system works." Cyril's eyes narrowed slightly. She had seen many simulations during her career, but most of them were just that, simulations. They never worked as expected in real life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. Without another word, Sarah nodded to a technician standing nearby. The technician pressed a button, and a soft humming sound filled the room. On a screen in front of them, a missile was shown on a trajectory toward a target. The missile was fast, and it seemed almost impossible to stop. Then something incredible happened. As the missile neared the target, the entire system came to life. The web of interconnected equipment lit up, and the air seemed to vibrate with energy. The missile's path was suddenly altered. The system emitted a series of pulses, and the missile was thrown off course, its trajectory now veering into a harmless direction. Cyril stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had expected the missile to hit the target, or for the system to fail in some way. But instead, the Aegis shield had not only stopped the missile, it had done so with ease. Sarah turned to Cyril with a smile. "That's what we're working on. The system doesn't just block attacks, it redirects them. It changes the path of the threat before it ever reaches the target." For a moment, Cyril didn't speak. She was too stunned by what she had just witnessed. The Aegis shield wasn't just some simple defense system. It was an intelligent, adaptable force. It could think, respond, and outsmart incoming attacks in ways that had never been done before. "Impossible," Cyril muttered to herself, but she was still in awe. "I thought you were just a primitive species. How can you do this?" Sarah's smile softened, and she approached Cyril. "I told you, Cyril. It's not about power. It's about using what we have. We don't have the best resources, and we don't have your technology. But we have something just as powerful, our will. We want to survive. And because of that, we never stop looking for ways to protect ourselves." Cyril looked at the human captain, her thoughts in a whirlwind. What she had just seen was groundbreaking. The Aegis shield was not just a defense. It was a revolutionary concept. Humans had found a way to protect their cities without relying on brute force, without resorting to weapons of mass destruction. It was a system designed to preserve life rather than destroy it. And yet it was clear to Cyril now. Humans were not weak. They had something the Synax could not understand: determination. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about adapting, changing, and growing stronger with each challenge. The Synax had always relied on their superiority, on their advanced technology, but now, Cyril wasn't so sure that would be enough. "I have underestimated you," Cyril said finally, her voice low but sincere. "Your species is not weak. In fact, I think you might be the most resilient species I've ever encountered." Sarah's eyes softened. "Thank you, Cyril. We don't need to be the strongest. We just need to be smart enough to survive." Cyril looked at the Aegis shield again, then back at the humans around her. She had arrived on Earth thinking it was a place to conquer. But now, standing in the midst of this unexpected strength, she wondered if maybe the humans were the ones who would do the conquering in the end, not by force, but by outsmarting their enemies at every turn. The human species was no longer the underdog in her eyes. They were rivals, and Cyril couldn't help but admire that. Cyril walked through the bustling streets of the human city, still processing everything she had learned about Earth's technology. The Aegis shield had shocked her to the core, and the more she thought about it, the more it unsettled her. For the first time in years, the Synax commander began to question her beliefs. Had she been wrong to consider the humans a weak species? As she walked, she noticed people going about their daily routines, fathers and mothers walking their children to school, merchants selling their goods, and workers rushing to their jobs. The humans seemed so ordinary. But it was clear now that beneath this ordinary exterior was a species with immense potential. XRL had expected Earth to be an easy conquest. The Synax had crushed entire civilizations that were far more advanced than humanity. But this was something different. The humans' resourcefulness, their ability to adapt, and their deep desire to protect what they held dear had proven to be their greatest strength. "We need to test it," Sarah said beside her, breaking Cyril's thoughts. The human captain had been quiet for a while, allowing Cyril time to process the demonstrations, but now there was a renewed sense of urgency in her voice. "Test it?" Cyril asked, confused. She stopped walking and turned to face Sarah. "You mean the Aegis shield?" "Yes," Sarah replied, her expression serious. "We need to see if it can withstand a real full-scale attack. A simulation is one thing, but in reality, there are many variables. We don't have the luxury of relying on theoretical outcomes." Cyril's brows furrowed. "You're asking me to help you test your defense system. What makes you think the Synax would agree to such an idea?" Sarah nodded, understanding the hesitation. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we need this. The Aegis shield is our best chance to protect our planet, and if we're going to convince others of its power, we need to test it against a real threat." Cyril took a step back, her thoughts racing. A part of her wanted to refuse. After all, the Synax had always seen themselves as the rulers of the galaxy. Helping the humans test their technology would not only be a risk, but also a humbling experience. Yet, another part of her, the part that had been slowly shifting over the past few days, understood that this wasn't just about the human survival. It was about something bigger, change. "All right," Cyril said, her voice firm. "But if we're going to do this, we will do it on my terms. The Synax will be watching, and we need to ensure that no one else gets hurt." Sarah gave a small smile, recognizing the challenge in Cyril's tone. "Of course, we'll make sure everything is in place, and we'll have your team monitor everything. You'll be in control." The two women walked back toward the compound, where a team of technicians was already preparing for the test. Cyril's mind was filled with questions. Could the human system really stand up to a full-scale attack? Or was it just an illusion of strength? As they entered the command center, Sarah directed Cyril to a large screen. On it, a countdown had begun. In the distance, an enormous mock fleet had been positioned. Several ships, designed to mimic the tactics of real enemies. The idea was to see if the Aegis shield could handle multiple threats at once. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, turning to Cyril. The Synax leader studied the ships on the screen, then looked at Sarah. "I am ready. Let's see if your system can live up to its promises." With a final nod, Sarah pressed a button, and the countdown reached 0. The mock fleet began its approach. The ships were fast, and their weapons were powerful. Cyril could sense the tension in the room, the anticipation that hummed through the air. The moment of truth had arrived. "Activate the Aegis shield," Sarah called. The technicians swiftly input the commands, and Cyril's eyes narrowed as she watched the system come online. The Aegis shield lit up, a web of glowing lines spreading across the screen. The ships were nearing. Cyril's hand tightened into a fist as she watched the first ship fire its weapons. But as the weapons came closer, something unexpected happened. The Aegis shield didn't just stop the attack, it absorbed the energy and redirected it. The ship's missiles exploded harmlessly in the distance, far away from the target. Cyril blinked in disbelief. She had expected the shield to deflect the attack, but redirecting the energy. This was beyond anything she had imagined. The other ships fired, one after another. Each time, the Aegis shield responded with precision. Every attack was absorbed and deflected with ease, as if the system knew exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to prevent any damage. Cyril's gaze remained fixed on the screen, her mind racing. She had seen weapons far more advanced than these ships. She had seen entire fleets wiped out with a single command. But here, on Earth, the humans had built something that was changing the rules. They had created a defense that didn't rely on destruction but on prevention, a defense that didn't seek to overpower the enemy but outsmart it. This is extraordinary, Cyril muttered under her breath. As the last ship was neutralized, Sarah turned to her eyes filled with pride. You see, it worked. The Aegis shield can handle it. Azrael took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of awe. The humans had done it. They had built a defense system that was nearly unstoppable. It wasn't just a tool of war. It was a tool for peace. And in that moment, Cyril realized something that would change everything. The Synax weren't the only ones who had mastered technology. The humans, with their will to survive and their ability to adapt, had created something that could challenge the greatest powers in the galaxy. I underestimated you, Cyril said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. Sarah smiled, her eyes full of gratitude and hope. We're just getting started. Cyril took a step back, the weight of everything she had learned settling in her mind. The galaxy had always been a place where power ruled, where strength was the measure of all. But now she knew that the future wasn't about brute force. It was about intelligence, about adapting, about surviving. And in that moment, Cyril knew that the human species was a force to be reckoned with. The air was thick with the hum of machines and the soft murmurs of the technicians, but Cyril's mind was far away. She stood outside the control room, her thoughts racing. The Aegis shield had surpassed all expectations. It had proven to be a game changer, a system that could protect an entire city from the most powerful attacks. But there was something more that had shifted inside her. Her respect for the humans had grown immeasurably. They were not just survivors. They were innovators, creators of technology that could not only defend them, but also reshape the future of war. Cyril had spent years traveling the galaxy, believing in the superiority of her own people. She had seen civilizations fall and rise, but never had she encountered a species like the humans. They were resourceful, determined, and most surprising of all, capable of building a future without relying on destruction. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Captain Sarah approaching. The human leader's face was calm, but her eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of success. You did it, Sarah said softly, standing beside her. Azrael didn't answer right away. Instead, she gazed out over the city, the lights sparkling in the distance. She was no longer just an observer. She felt a connection to this world, a sense of something deeper than mere technology or strategy. You've built something incredible, Teriel finally said, her voice heavy with new understanding. Sarah smiled. It wasn't just me. It's the entire human race. We work together, and when we do, we can accomplish anything. Cyril nodded thoughtfully. She had heard similar words before from other species, but something about Sarah's sincerity struck a chord. The humans didn't just build technology for their own benefit. They built it to protect each other, to preserve their world, and perhaps, if necessary, to defend it from the stars. I've learned much during my time here, Cyril admitted, turning to face Sarah. Your species is unlike any I've ever encountered. You do not seek power for its own sake. Instead, you seek to preserve life, to protect those you love. Sarah's smile softened. That's what makes us strong. Our strength is in our unity, in our will to survive and help one another. We may not have the best technology, but we never stop trying to improve. And now, we have you. Cyril raised an eyebrow. Me? Sarah nodded. The Synax may have the technology, but you have something the rest of us don't. A knowledge of the galaxy. You understand how to survive out there. And that's something we can learn from. Cyril was silent for a long moment, considering Sarah's words. The human species had already shown her their strength, their resilience, but the offer to join forces, to collaborate rather than conquer, was something new, something she hadn't expected. "I have to admit," Fazerel said, her tone thoughtful, "I never imagined that I would be standing here, considering an alliance with humans. But the more I see of you, the more I realize that we could achieve great things together." Sarah's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and excitement. "Are you saying?" Cyril held up a hand to pause her. "I'm saying that I would like to see what happens if the Synax and humanity work together. We may have more differences than similarities, but we have one thing in common: the will to survive." Sarah's expression softened into a smile. "I think that's a good place to start." For the first time, Cyril felt the weight of her past beliefs lift. She had come to Earth expecting to conquer, to add another world to the Synax empire. But now she realized that true power did not lie in conquest. True power lay in cooperation, in mutual respect. "I will need to contact my superiors," Cyril said, her voice steady. "They will not accept this easily, but I will tell them what I've seen. I will show them that the humans are not our enemies. They are an ally." Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together, Cyril, no matter what comes next." Cyril looked out at the horizon again, her mind filled with new possibilities. The Synax were powerful, yes, but the humans had something they didn't. They had a unity that transcended technology. They had the ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow stronger with each challenge they faced. As the two of them stood in silence, watching the lights of the city sparkle below, Cyril couldn't help but feel that this moment was the beginning of something much bigger than herself, something that could change the course of the galaxy. Hours later, Cyril sat in a quiet room, speaking into her communicator. She had already sent word to her superiors about the success of the Aegis Shield test, but this next message was different. This one would change everything. "I am writing to inform you of an unprecedented development," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The humans of Earth have demonstrated technology far beyond what we had anticipated. Their defensive systems, including the Aegis Shield, are unlike anything we've encountered. I believe it is in our best interest to form an alliance with them." Xrl paused, considering her next words carefully. The Synax had never been known for forming alliances with lesser species, but these were not ordinary humans. They were capable of more than any other species she had encountered. Perhaps, for the first time, the Synax would have to adapt. "I will await your response, but I advise you to consider the benefits of cooperation. This is not just about Earth. It is about the future of the galaxy." As the message ended, Cyril sat back, wondering what the future would hold. There was uncertainty ahead, but one thing was clear: humans were no longer just a species to be conquered. They were an ally. And in that moment, Cyril realized that the galaxy had just become a much more complicated place, but also a more hopeful one.